Okay, so we'll call our meeting to order. It's 7:02. Our first order of business is our roll call, which I think Jerry has by those in attendance. Our first order of business, approval of our minutes from our last meeting on, sorry, I have it in front of me. We have the date now.
If anybody needs to see them, I can put them up on the
On
screen.
the first, has everybody had an opportunity to look at those? Everybody's,
Yeah, I make a motion to accept the minutes.
any second? Danny? Any discussion? No discussion? Okay, all in favor of approval of the minutes? Ayes. Any nays? Any abstention? Okay, we're good.
Perfect.
We have one member of the public, Rich Costa. Rich, any comments at this time?
Yeah, actually, I do have a couple comments
Okay.
that I'd like to make. I was speaking to Eddie Kolnaski today, who's the one of the field hockey coaches at the high school, and he asked me to bring a couple of things to the group. And it was to do with them using up the turf field, and some suggestions that he had for the group to consider. And I thought about it in a little bit bigger context from our discussions that have happened over the course of the last 6 months or so. And these things have been talked about before, a couple of them. But I really think that as you guys continue to deliberate and as you're finishing up, that included with your report, there should be some mention, and some of the people have brought this up, of the scheduling of the fields, how that process needs to be streamlined, how the maintenance of the fields, that process needs to be streamlined. All of these things would help with the utilization of the fields that we have, and with the utilizations of the ones that we're planning upon building. And then the other thing was, and this is where the Eddie Kolnaski thing comes in, I think that there needs to be some kind of statement about the scope of some of these projects. And he brought it up in the fact that, well, they have a great turf field and they're very happy about using that field up there for the middle school. The field hockey, it's really helping them a lot. But they've noticed a few things that might not have been thought about with the field. They don't have any storage up there, and these have to be included in many of the fields that we build. And it should be part of the report, I think. There's no storage up there. Obviously, we've talked about the lights before. The bathrooms, there are no bathrooms up there. There's porta potties right now. Water, there's no water up there for them to fill their water jugs or anything like that. They have to go back to the high school. Electricity, simply no, they can't find any electrical outlets. So they don't have a scoreboard, they don't have a sound system, but at least if there was an electricity at the field, they could use portable systems. So that needs to be thought about. So all of those things really need to be thought about in terms of the scope of some of these projects. It's not just putting a field in, and especially I was thinking about our main athletic complex at the high school. People have to understand that if that field is turfed and if it is improved, that whole area, that's a pretty large project. It's not just plopping a turf field in there. There's the field house that has to be talked about. There's concession stands. There's the lighting that have to be replaced. Because that field is talking about that field being used for multiple sports like field hockey and lacrosse and soccer. That field is going to have to be enlarged. And that's going to necessitate the rebuilding of the entire track, which goes around the field that was built in 1960. That's a football field. It is not wide enough for all those sports we talked about. So there's fencing, there's the bleachers in that situation. And those field event areas that we talked about last week for the track needing to be adjacent to the track area, which is really the only track that's in town. So there's things that need to go into the report, I feel, and you should all discuss it, about the scope of some of these projects, so that, you know, we know about these things because we deal with fields all the time, but some of the general public might not understand, you know, why would you need to rebuild your track? You know, you're just putting a field in the middle of it, or why do you need a new field house? You have a beautiful, well, not beautiful, but you have a field house there, not realizing that it's not ADA compliant, not Title IX compliant. So as your discussions move forward, I would like to see some of those things included in the final report. That's it.
Thank you, Rich.
Frank, we do have a hand from Counselor Bordelon.
Oh, go ahead, Counselor.
No, I just wanted to thank Coach Costa for that. I can't stress enough. I've been saying some of those pieces, but just the need, like, and you know, sometimes we build things and we have like the field, but all the extras aren't there. So you know, it makes it extremely tough to utilize certain things and not have the facilities that meet the needs of the fields that we're looking for, especially the ABA compliance. You know, and I do, once again, some of the things, the dollar amount that's going to come on the table is going to be the shock and awe. But I think it is important, as Rich has stated, that we do talk about those ABA and really add those into that report to make it fully encumbersome, to really talk about where we could go with this and what the needs really are of the facilities, because it's not just the fields that we're lacking, it is the facilities as well. Storage, ADA compliance. I mean, with COVID, you know, the outhouse thing is not always the best and the cleanest, and a lot of our fields now, that's all they have. You know, you go to tennis, it's an outhouse. You go to the baseball field, it's an outhouse, or if the main building is open. And so we're lacking not only fields, but we are lacking facilities. And I think that is a very, you know, important thing to stress, as well as making sure equal access for all gender and gender equality, that they have access to a section of a field house or their own field house with facilities, and that all children and adolescents have the accessibility to perform adequately and access to those facilities, no matter their limitations or disability. So I think that's really, really important too when we look at the upgrade, and I totally agree with that. So I just really hope that we could add that in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Yeah, I think that we put something, as we go through and put a report on what we're going to do, I think it's almost like we bulletize the needs that would come using a list that Rich has started for each facility, so that people understand it exactly how he said it. We're not just plopping a field down. There's more to it than that. And I don't know if you do it field by field or do it by in general, but I think we'll have to come through that as to do that. Good. Thank you very much, Rich. Okay, so on the agenda, as Jerry and I were speaking right before, I think we need to go to old business before we do new business, as old business was kind of discussing the couple of fields we were short and people's thoughts and ideas on where we might want to relocate the fields that right now we have identified as a need, but don't really have a home for them after we went through our discussions the other day. I believe it looks like, from my recollection, and as Jerry put on here, an adult softball field and another baseball field. So I know we had a couple of emails, Chad, right after, from Jay, right after our last meeting. So you want to just go through what was the final answer there for the Ed Cutler?
Yep. So final answer at Cutler, what appears to be being built is a full-size baseball field and pretty close to a full-size rectangle. But those two overlap each other. Like there is no outfield fence because the entire outfield is needed for the rectangle. So we updated that kind of in our spreadsheet of what's going in. The question I kind of have for the committee on that is that really, so basically what we heard from the school board or the building committee was they were putting back what was previously existing, which is probably a good plan so we don't lose things in the long run. But if that's where Fitch is going to be practicing JV, if that's the intention, is that really going to be feasible at an elementary school? Are we going to bus a JV or a freshman team down to the new Cutler Elementary School and we'll be having baseball practice basically in their playscape area, even though there is a playscape area separate, but that's technically like a recess area or a gym class because of the overlap of timing. So I think that's something to talk about if that's the right place for that. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Because the other concern with that is the fact that elementary stays in school much later.
Correct.
In high school, I remember when my son played JV baseball, they're down there by 2:30. You can't have a bunch of high school kids on an elementary property playing baseball while they're trying to learn up until 3. What time do they even let out elementary? I forget.
It's getting closer to 3:05, 3:30 by the time they're letting out right now. At least that's what my youngest that's still in elementary seems to be getting out about then.
Yeah.
But I agree. That's to me is a conflict of scheduling and is that the right place to put that field?
And then if they have after school programs like Treehouse, usually those children who have after school care till like 4 or 5 use the playground on good weather so that they can go outside and play while they're waiting to be picked up. Basically like a before and after school program. So that
Correct.
conflict with that field.
Correct. That was my concerns with it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then at the West Side Elementary School, they are basically the same thing was there. They're putting back the same fields that are currently there, and it's a small. I shouldn't say small, but it's a softball size field, and then a small rectangle that's currently there. And according to the plans, they're actually that area. If anybody's been there, it's down a steep hill from everything else, and they must have some excess fill as part of the project because they're going to lift that whole field up 4 feet. So they're raising the whole elevation of the grade down there 4 feet, but then putting back the same 2 fields that are there now. So basically a little league size softball field and a smaller than regulation size rectangle. And again, those 2 fields overlap. So in my opinion, at an elementary school, that's fine, right? Both those fields serve the elementary school. They kind of serve the little league perspective a little bit, and that's fine. So my only concern is, should we be putting a full-size baseball field back at a new elementary school, when we're done?
So just to share with you, everybody here, I did update this to include the fields at Westside and Cutler, and kind of based on our previous discussions, what the deficit and loss is, the short one full-size baseball field and adult softball. I think last time it was 2 full-size baseball, but since one is being apparently built at Cutler, that changes the number there a bit. I take the point that it may not work for high school, but some of the need for full-size baseball was actually put forward by travel teams and whatnot. So it may be something that is available for those types of uses rather than high school use. So it's just something to consider there.
I agree. Good point. And then the other thing, I'll just kind of jump into the couple things I was asked to look into. Rich, you're looking at the throwing areas. So I got the diagram that you sent over of how you currently lay it out. and we could go on the Google Maps and see, good enough aerial image that matched up with how you had it, and lay it out in CAD. And I will be very honest that it's tough to find a new home for those throwing areas that's not on that field. As you guys have it laid out, we could probably lay it out a little bit better and get it to work easier. But of course, things are different from probably 40, 50 years ago when those throwing pads were put in. If we were to do a big project there, like we've talked about, it's a complete rebuild of the field, the track, and the bleachers, and we were to put a new field down the hill from that, it is possible we could fit the throwing areas just adjacent to the current track. So the area where you have them now in that practice area, it would be just downhill of that, basically between that area and the field that'd be below it. And that's where the pump house is for the water main and stuff like that. It'd almost be like a plateau down there. Again, it's a lot of expense because it's a steep hill, and we have to make 150 feet worth of flat ground for the throwing areas. We could make them in a way that they don't overlap the outfields, so that you could use them all at the same time. We'd want to look at exactly how much safety area you want to either side and things like that, but it's not ideal, is how I'll say it. We could do it, but it's just going to be on the expensive side. So it might be worth considering leaving that practice area as true grass, just upgrading the field and upgrading the quality of the grass and leaving it as a throwing area. Maybe we reconfigured it a little bit, but yeah, I think it was a valid point, because normally we can find enough flat space to kind of fit one in here and fit one in there and make it work. Because of that big hill there, it takes a lot of earthwork to get a flat enough space to fit those throwing areas, without overlapping significantly. So I think that was a good point to look at. And I think it's something we should talk about as a committee as to, that impacts if that third field should be synthetic or not. And then the last thing I'll say is I don't have anything ready for kind of presentation yet, but I was asked to look at putting all the numbers as we're kind of proposing these fields, as Jerry has outlined here, putting them back into our spreadsheet and seeing what the spreadsheet kicks back out to us. Are we putting in enough to meet the need? And as we had it here, as Jerry has updated it to the most current, when I put it in, actually, it comes out quite well. We meet the needs pretty much across the board. And that's even with our couple of deficits as we have listed here. And we actually have what looks to be a surplus of one rectangle. And again, that's probably just because we're adding lights everywhere we can add lights. And because of the way fields are actually scheduled, when we do it through, analytically looking at just hours of use, we schedule it from the earliest time you can to the latest time you can. And with lights, that of course extends it quite a bit. And we're not looking at, high school sports all needing to practice right at the same time. And so that's where in our spreadsheet, it's going to show a little bit of a surplus, when in reality, from a scheduling perspective, we're probably meeting the need. So that's my other report on that.
Now, just because we had talked about it, did we still have a need for a men's softball field? Because we took one away, right? We didn't really place it anywhere.
We took one away. We didn't place it anywhere because there was still the one at Washington Park. And the way in our spreadsheet, there wasn't a big enough demand for that from what we see as scheduled clubs using the facility. It wasn't just the mere fact that there was one and now we don't have one anymore. We looked at, how often it was actually getting used. And it just there wasn't that much there to demand it.
Does that sound right, Jerry? In your perspective?
Right now, the only current users we have for adult softball are the EB Athletic Club. So, that's I don't know how many teams they have in their league. Maybe 8 or 10 teams probably in the league that play at Sutton. And could they make it work over at Washington Park or I think there would be some impact there. But yeah, I guess unless we have a place to put it, I don't have this option one and option two don't have a good place to put an adult-sized softball field. So that's why it's on the agenda as a item of discussion.
Because at the bottom, you had possible alternatives for places, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if folks kind of, look through these things. Cop Park is mostly an undeveloped location. Birch Plains is at, what is that? Thomas Road and Pequannock Road, is it? Over by by the airport. A golfing area that has been it's no longer a golfing area. It's just kind of, going back to native property, I guess, so they don't get taxed on it as highly. But it basically is a flat area. The town does not own that. Certainly Mary Morrison. Ring Drive is a location that's actually back in Ring Drive. Probably nobody knows where that is, but adult softball field could potentially be put in there, but there's no parking, and that it is extremely hilly, I guess I'll say. So when Chad says you'd have to do a lot of work to flatten it out up at the high school, same thing there at Ring Drive. The Knowing School property, an adult softball field would fill that up, and I think the town council has already kind of talked about not putting any kind of an athletic field up there, so that might be a moot point. And Boulder Heights is the property the town got, or kind of did that exchange with the Merritt property for the building of the middle school, that we kind of, made that change with the state. But again, the area, Boulder Heights is over by the Ledges apartment complex, and it's called Boulder Heights for a reason. And there are ledges and lots of work over there as well. So, and not particularly accessible from a, how do you get there standpoint. So, yeah, there aren't none of these options really jump out as hey, that's a great thing. I guess if there was anything, it might be Mary Morrison might be the closest thing that, maybe we could overlay a softball field on the rectangle that's there in some way. That's
the rectangle in the back of the school, kind of in the
correct
away from the front.
Correct.
In that corner over there.
Yeah.
Right. Now, make me smarter. We're still using Mary Morrison, right, as a school.
Yes.
So, but those would be like. I'm worried about having the same issues at that elementary school that you would have with with a field at the new elementary
I don't think
school.
there would be the same type of issue there. Any kind of adult softball league would not be happening during the day likely. So it would be after hours type stuff, I think would.
Yeah. It sounds like by putting a new baseball field down at Sutton Park, we've kind of displaced that field with a second baseball field. That's pretty much what we've done. Correct. And it just seems to me like, from a town standpoint, there's much greater need for a baseball field than an adult softball field. From a usage standpoint by members of the community, just seems like that's pretty much what we've done.
Hey, Jerry, do you know if they play adult softball on any of the other baseball fields? I mean, I know it's not skinned and stuff like that, but base path, I think, is about the same.
Yeah, a full-size baseball field is 90-foot base paths.
Right.
Typically in softball, I think high school is 65 feet. Slow pitch softball is probably 70.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I was hoping we could have them just play on, if they need a shorter outfield fence, we could have a temporary fence or something like that on a new baseball field.
Well, I don't, yeah, I think you probably could actually let them play on a baseball field. I would just say go drop down your bases and,
Right.
not have anchors or anything. But yeah, they would have to play with a mound in the middle of their field and bases 20 feet further out and just kind of know that they're there.
Right.
Yep.
But it's at least possible. I mean,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
certainly not
Lisa,
ideal.
I
Possible.
would agree, not ideal. But if you're looking at $1 million expenditure for an adult league that I'm assuming probably doesn't rent the facility. I mean, maybe they pay a little bit, but
Yeah, they rent it. Yep.
okay. But it might take 100 years to get the recoupment of $1 million. If there's a way to if there's a way to have that play on a baseball field, again, not ideal. I'm just trying to think of, in my head, I'm totaling up how many fields we're adding up, how many millions of dollars that's going to be,
Correct.
and when we're trying to meet the needs for the overall community, yes, I wish we could do it for everybody too, but
And it may even be that ED says, hey, we got a baseball field. We can offer a baseball league instead of an adult softball league. That's a possibility as well.
yeah.
Right, because when we talked about it before, we had talked about the Groton Community Center, but that actually ends up being the skin fields and the rectangles there.
Yeah, and there isn't enough space for an adult-sized softball field. The fence, there isn't enough space there to
Oh,
even.
right, no.
There will be a small softball field at the community center, but or a little league baseball field, one of the two. But
Yeah, definitely not big
not big enough for an adult-sized one.
Right. So I think we would just, I would think that at this point in time, we would just have to not replace it. At least from what I could, we don't seem to have an area to put it in per se, that most of those areas are just not valid, that's not going to happen. So, I mean, that would be my thought. We just have to leave it out. The need just doesn't seem to be there.
Well, I think the other thing we can talk about as we keep going, I mean, I think we keep it on the list of things that we're losing, so that we know we're aware of the fact that we're losing it and probably not putting it back. But I think, and we haven't started talking about it yet, but as we go forward, as we talk about how we enroll this to the public, I think part of what we should do before we really take it to public is to bring back in all the user groups that we talked to, whether it's baseball, softball, all the youth leagues, and even invite in, the EB Adult League and say, hey, we've collected all this information. Here's what we see the needs are. Here's how many of those we think we can cram into all these different parts around town. This is how much we can accomplish. Here's our shortcomings, and get everybody to kind of buy into it or raise issue with it, and kind of vet it one more time to each of those groups before we really go back to the council or go too public with it, so that there's time to adjust and refine if need be. And maybe we find out that, what we think is not a big need, because again, I'm going by the hours that they had rented from 3 years ago. So if there's somehow a big need difference, then we can accommodate that now, but it just doesn't appear to be at the moment. So I think if we go through all those different groups, then ideally, we can kind of test it and make sure that the fit looks to be close to what we think it is, before we go too far down.
Just
Agreed.
to add on to your comment there, Chad, about, put it in your spreadsheet. And I'll just kind of anecdotally from what's happening right now at town fields. We have user groups on our fields right now that were not accounted for on that sheet. We have travel soccer that for the first time ever has access to Pequannock Plains Park because we don't have our Groton Soccer Club there. Those people are paying, whatever rental fee we choose to charge them pretty much on that field. we have posted rates, and I was wishing, man, we should have had those rates posted higher. And I've also had adult soccer teams and other people come to us looking for field space. So there's a group from Rhode Island, even a soccer club from Rhode Island that wants to come and use our fields, and they would be doing that today if the hot state list didn't have Rhode Island on it. So there, the extra capacity that Chad says may be there. I can tell you from a Parks and Rec standpoint, I don't see any problem with us having the ability to fill up those times. I don't think we'll have idle fields in town. If we add an extra rectangle, that field will be used by somebody. There are people that absolutely are chomping at the bit for field space right now.
Okay. I agree. No decision. I mean, I think that it's part of the process, and we do it exactly as Chad laid it out. I totally agree. And see what the folks that are using them agree with what we're saying and how we got to our decision. What else were we, softball?
So I guess, yeah, the questions, I guess, if there's a motion that the group cares to make about whether or not there's we want to, modify option 1 or option 2 in some way to account for, these potential deficits, or if we just want to move forward with the deficits as they exist, like Chad says, and just make sure that everybody knows going forward that this is what we see right now based on what we have, and present it to the people that have been stakeholders who have been providing this data to us, and asking them, is this workable? Does this sound good? Is this something that seems right to you, to kind of give it that extra bit of second, a chance to second guess us or whatever, just before we kind of roll this out formally to the council or others. So
I think I would agree with your second thought of if we have them all in again and let them know how we walked through it to get to where we were, and what would be the downside to them. If, like you said, maybe they know more than we do. They're the ones that are renting it or using it, and so I'm.
The more people that we have buying into this moving forward, the better.
True. Right. Any other discussion on that?
Yeah, Frank, I have a question. It's Bruce Wagner.
Go ahead.
So I may have missed the first part, but are we saying that there's still a deficit with a full-size baseball field and a adult softball field, or did we find a place for the baseball field?
there is a deficit of 1 baseball field. So that still exists. I will say one of the other things that I guess we didn't mention here tonight was that Grasso Tech is building 3 fields. They're building a rectangle, they're building a large baseball field, and they're building a high school softball field. So those fields are not within our control, but is it conceivable that the travel baseball teams or somebody else may be able to go to Grasso Tech to rent the field from them? Yes. I think that is a potential possibility that the need gets met in a different way rather than through us. In terms of, how Chad, his sheet worked, we can take that into account, but the field is worth, a bit less because it's not under our control. And there, so that does address the issue perhaps, or in some way. It doesn't make it a perfect fit, but it makes it, somewhat workable perhaps. or, depending on what kind of softball field Grasso builds, maybe they rent it out to EBAC, the EB Athletic Club to, play adult softball on that field. I don't, there's all kinds of potential there.
Sure.
Sure.
So the deficit for the baseball field, is that solely just travel baseball?
I guess
Was that the need driven by travel baseball?
I think it's from what we heard from the baseball folks, I think it is mostly travel, but we've got Vin and Rich here who have talked about the high school baseball team. You got a freshman team, a JV team, and a varsity team. That's
Right,
3 baseball teams, and they would potentially have access to 2 fields. One is at Sutton and at the high school. Those are 2 really convenient fields for them. And then they've got a 3rd field at, the new Cutler Elementary. Not ideal, some busing, some other kind of issues there. So kind of, it's a kind of thing. It's not an absolute, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, I think my only issue, and it's been from weeks back, that I just wanted to raise, and I guess if we were going to go forward and say, yeah, let's do a baseball field somewhere, would just be the longevity of the travel programs. I mean, I know my son has played for both 2 of the 3 owners, and he plays travel ball still. I'm actually at a workout right now, but those guys are also fathers. When those older kids go to college, or those travel programs gone from the area, I think that should factor into including those teams in the longevity of it all.
So Bruce, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying we should include them as a use to make sure that those programs can be long-lived because their fields are there? Or are you saying that there's a potential that they might not last because it's parent-driven, and therefore we might not want to build all the fields because they're a need now, they might not be a need in 5 years?
So I'm a baseball guy. I mean,
Yep.
if there's a baseball field for the taking, I would love a baseball field. But it does worry me that, if a team goes away, it may not be back the next season. So that's what worries me about factoring that in. And I see as EB, the EBAC has been around for a while, and I feel like they're not leaving the community for a long time. So if we had a choice, if we had to choose between the 2, I think I know which way I would go. But I just wanted to throw that out there as, if there's 6 to 8 travel teams being accounted for, that could change within the next 2-3 years.
So I fully agree with you there too. And that's where, when we did our initial counts for user groups, we don't count normally travel teams. We count like little league programs. We count the town programs that we feel have the longevity and will be there and might not be fluctuational with kids and parents. However, it appeared to be a big enough need with at least 3 teams in town that we should at least accommodate some level. And that's where I guess I was comfortable to say, if we're short a little bit, I'm okay with that, because we might be short a team in a year or 2. But there appears to be enough of a team right now that it makes sense to at least help accommodate. And it also seems to help out the high school quite a bit because they're short as well. And, but I would agree that we don't build all of them and then have baseball fields sitting around in a couple of years.
Sure. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Good.
Because those travel teams, as Jerry alluded to, weekends, after 5 or 6 o'clock, whatever the times are, they can be utilizing the Cutler Field. They could be utilizing possibly the Grosso Tech Field. So it's not as if, adding the Grosso Tech Field helps with the assumption that it can be utilized, which we believe it can. It helps a lot. And you will be getting somewhat of the Cutler field back to some extent. Maybe not as much as we used to use it, but if we have I'll call it the second field at Sutton Park, you've kind of closed that gap. In the high school needs, right after at 3 o'clock, you've got two fields ready to go they can walk down to, as we've talked about before, which would is a big plus, a huge plus. So I agree. You just don't know about the usage in 10 years after you build $1 million field. It's kind of going on a reach. So again, it would be part of that. We understand that it's not there today, and I mean, you'll get a big argument that they will need it. I understand that, but we know that the solid needs for sure. So it could go in that same bucket as the men's softball field, and if somewhere along the way, if we need to make that decision, then we can do that after that discussion. Again, still the issue would be where. They're both pretty much the same. I was pretty close to the same dimensions in general. So you still have that issue, the where.
Right.
Whichever one you fall down on, whichever one you want to choose as a committee, this is what we really think we need, this third field, which one would it be? And then B, where would you put it? And where would you put it seems to be kind of a difficult answer right now.
Would it be possible to modify Farquhar to accommodate both Little League softball and adult softball?
Farquhar is pretty well packed, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
That field is it's actually bigger than a high school softball field, but not
Right.
as big as Sutton used to be. So I mean, the center field fence is probably okay. The left field fence where it gets a little bit close, and there's a lot of balls going over that fence for adults. So I think there really isn't anything we can do with Farquhar other than leave that field the way it is. And speaking of options for people, if adults want to play on Farquhar, they can do that. They can go get some restricted flight softballs or some other way that, everybody's not hitting the ball over the fence. That there are options for doing that, or play with wooden bats instead of, composite double walled, bats that are going to, make it easier to hit the home runs. So, there are things that people can do to kind of, modify what they're doing to maybe make some of these other spaces work as well.
Okay.
Say from a baseball perspective too, the other thing that I think is worth stressing when we talk to them is the biggest need we seem to hear was that intermediate sized field. And that might help solve some of the, it was 3, but is it 2 small and 1 intermediate instead of, 3 total instead of, we have it written down as 3 full size plus an intermediate. But I recall, and I'd have to go back in the minutes, I recall the discussion kind of being, 3 fields would be great. With 3 fields, we could do it, and then we talked about an intermediate also, but it's kind of one of those, maybe 3 total fields, and one of those is the intermediate, then we're meeting hopefully their needs with that intermediate going to Claude Chester. So that's my only thought with baseball too, is I think that was what I heard was the biggest need, was that field that we don't have one of in town. So if we put at least one in, and then we get some other that helps support high school, and then can also help, travel leagues after hours. I think we've gone a long ways to help their problems.
Okay. Okay. So those are our shortages, right? As we saw them.
So are we comfortable just kind of taking these potentially 2 options to the user groups? I can put out the call to user groups, and in, a couple of weeks we get everybody on big meeting and kind of present this information to them and give them a chance to react, understand, digest, ask questions?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely.
And I think,
My only thought is, do we present two options, or we certainly can, or do we just say, hey, here, we really think this is the best option? Because it's also at some level we start getting design by committee where we have so many floating ideas out there that it's hard to nail anything down. So I normally always say, let's go for one, suggest what we think we want and see how that meets. And if we get a lot of pushback that there's something we're missing, then we can at least have option 2 in the back pocket that we've already kind of agreed to, or we figure out how to fit whatever that is that we're missing between option 1 and option 2.
and Portia had her hand up, Frank. Portia had her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Portia. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I also think it's, where on this form do you want to add the other deficiencies that also make a feel, wholesome, as Coach Costa discussed, as many others have discussed? Where would we add that on this document?
In my mind, I think we would add that, as we move forward in the process, and I think we have that information noted. I think we could make some blanket statements like, in a location that has electricity, we want electricity. In a location that's got water, we want water and restroom. In a location, I can see if we're putting a field somewhere that doesn't have those things. You might say it costs a lot of money just to bring in water or something like that. You might not, but I'm pretty certain that just about all these locations support all of those amenities that Rich went through. And I think there needs to be electricity. I think there needs to be water. I think there needs to be sewer. I think there needs to be lights. I think there needs to be parking. I think there needs to be bleachers. There needs to be fences.
I think I'll restate it. Maybe I'm saying it the wrong way. What I'm trying to say is I think it's important when you're presenting an option, if you guys are going to present 2 or 1, I think when presenting it, it's important to have those things as part of the presentation, not just throwing them in, right? I think it's kind of like you're selling your house, you want to present it with everything in it. You don't want to say, well, I will throw in a stove later and a refrigerator later. You want to show it at its best. So I kind of in the mindset that we need to nail that down too, and I think it's also important to identify the current deficiencies that we have if we did nothing, right? We have what we are short of as far as fields go, but talk about the facilities as well, because some people are about the fields and some people are about facilities and access to facilities and lack thereof. So I think it's really to sell the whole package. I personally think, this is just a thought, that it should be included in there, depending if you go with 1 model or 2 models to present or how you present it. I think when you present it, we should have those thoughts forward in front saying, okay, if we do nothing, our Fitch High School football field, needs to be capped. It's unsafe. It's at grade whatever. Our bleachers are not ABA compliant. We do not currently have, because the average person doesn't pay attention to all of these deficiencies, as much as people that are involved, as much as you might want to think that everybody would. Like someone else I talked the other day, they said, oh, really? The field house doesn't have a girls section? Like, oh, there's an outhouse sometimes by tennis. There's no restroom back there. Like, I think we're assuming a lot that people know. A lot of people don't even have kids in schools and never use these fields, right? So I don't know. I just think that we need to identify the do nothing plan with including the facilities that we're lacking. Talking about like the long jump runways that are, outdated, there's no bathroom down that way, access for, female athletes, locker room, like all those things, ABA, like I think that should be in there. And then looking at it with the options and what the facilities would look like with it, and how that would change over time too.
I think, Portia, I'm sorry I interrupted you there.
Yeah, that's all right.
I was going to say, I think that's absolutely spot on. I think what I can do is probably put that information together and update our options with what we would put in for amenities at each of these locations. And I think Vin, I think, has a handle, and Chad, I think if the three of us, if we agree, maybe we can just do that. And like we've done these options here, I think I can just probably take a first crack at it, set it out to the two of you, and make sure that it meets certainly the needs at the high school. And Chad, your professional opinion would be great to put on that. But yeah, I think what you're saying there makes a lot of sense, and we can and can be done in a pretty short order, I think.
Right, because I think what happens sometimes, and you see it around the town, as Coach Costa has identified, we have great fields that have gone up, and then the amenities somehow, it's almost like, I don't think anyone ever thought that they would, I mean, I don't know, power is needed. Looking at marching band, right? They need power. Everyone needs power if there's no scoreboards. You can bring in, portable ones, bathrooms. I mean, I don't know how many times the freshmen are down, JV team are down at the middle elementary school, and the school is locked and they have to use the restroom. They're bussed all the way down there with no restroom. I mean, there's just things that don't make sense, right? So I do think that is very important in the whole big picture. Thank you.
We need to look at ourselves as more than just a fields task force and an athletic facilities task force.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. Because if we do nothing, I can't speak for it. If we do nothing, we don't, and no one updates anything. We have to update our facilities, like our facilities that don't even exist. Like there's so many needs that need to be addressed in that area alone that we're running out of time with, being out of compliance. So I don't know. Anyway, thank you.
Go ahead, Rich.
Ledyard High School just did a recent renovation up there at their football field and their track area. And when they were bringing this to the town, and I've seen the presentation, they did that in a visual way with a slideshow. So they took a picture of what exactly was there now. And then they talked about, what the deficiency was and why they needed these other things. And I think that was a very effective way of doing what you're looking to do, Councilor Bordelon. Actually some visuals, pictures of what is there presently, and then what the proposals are.
I think that's a great idea, and I think big picture, people keep saying cost, but I think the more we show our deficiencies, just like Ledger did in that great presentation that Costa speaks of, it also opens up the availability to start applying for different federal and state grants, where it's not just the field, right? It's the compliance issue. So it opens up a broader audience and accessibility to grants and things that we could go for. I know Ledger had a lot of help from different people to get that on board. It wasn't just the taxpayers of the town. There was a lot of help from outside too. So just looking at it from that perspective and making sure that we don't box out opportunities for those types of things and really stressing the need of beyond the field. Thank you.
Anybody else? Hand up? You good? Yeah, that has to be part of the package. No. So that's a good idea, Jerry. I like that, the three of you, and kind of come up with the needs that you would have at each of these facilities.
Well, I think pretty much we actually have it. It's just probably a matter of typing it out and having it. That's pretty much what it is.
Right.
I think what Rich is talking about, having a, like a visual presentation that we go to, after we kind of settle on a final plan and trying to sell that final plan to the council and selling that plan to the community. I think at that point, those visuals and stuff that Rich is talking about, that's gonna be a bit more work. But yeah, just coming up with a list of amenities for presenting to user groups, like I say, in 2 weeks or something like that is certainly something that is absolutely possible.
So the other thing that we obviously Chad touched on right at the beginning was back to the high school. So his thoughts on the three fields up there. We had all talked about 3 synthetic surfaces up there with the throwing area to be put somewhere. Just sounds to me it's maybe somewhat, it's going to be pretty difficult to have that done. So do we want to rethink and have our plan more be the two synthetic surfaces, and then what is now the practice field would be a grass field, which obviously would be used for I'm assuming we would end up being some sort of a practice facility and also track season, obviously for that idea. So our thought was last time was 3 synthetics if we could fit the other throwing area. It seems a reach for the throwing area. Just kind of reading what Chad was talking about. Any other thoughts? I know, Ben, that's probably right in your wheelhouse of need, but I just don't. It just doesn't sound. It sounds like it would be very. If it's going to work, it's going to be very cost ineffective, if you would. But I don't know what you guys think. Go ahead, Ben. You can start.
I can chime in.
Yeah.
I see what the points that were made, and I get it. And I went back out there last week and walked around with a couple of people. I'm not sure we would need to rip up the whole track. To make that field wide enough to accommodate all sports, field hockey, soccer, football, you may have enough room with the relocation of a couple of things. So I know that's a huge, to rip up the track and you know, there's a thought of pushing the bleachers just back a little bit and expanding in that direction. I would have to actually get out there and measure, but I don't think we're that far off being the width of a field hockey and soccer field.
One of the things I would say then is, you know, like I'm gonna look at the people that are designing it, Chad or, you know, whoever. I mean, they've kind of looked at that and what the standard size is. You know, I think if we start getting into the weeds of you know, going out and measuring things ourselves, I think we're doing something that, you know, I think we're out of our element. I think, you know, we state the need, and in your case, and you know, if we're talking about you know, if we had 2 synthetic and 1 natural turf, you know, I think as option 2 says here, that what that does, I'm going to let the designers design it, but they'll make it fit in whatever way they need to make it fit. But it's going to require some overflow use of the middle school for high school sports. You know, that's the thing. And I guess, you know, that would be the question I would be more looking to you to answer. Like, is that a doable thing? Is that going to suit the high school's need if you have to go to the middle school and use some overflow use? That's
yes. If we had the middle school as a synthetic surface that the high school could use at night, yes, absolutely, we'd be fine. But that's the if, you know.
correct.
That's
Well, and I think, you know, as we go through here, you know, and we've got the, you know, representatives from the Board of Ed here, you know, and I think when we go forward and we present this, and I think, yeah, the Board of Ed is a definite user group whose opinion matters here. And if we say that, you know, like, look, we're going with option 2, but that requires, you know, high school use of the middle school. So just make sure everybody knows that as we go forward, and then the implementation comes, and you know, we don't run into the barrier at that time. And I'm sorry, I had my screen share on, but I did notice Portia had her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Portia.
Thank you. I guess I was just curious where Vin was going. Like, I guess I wanted to understand because my computer cut out. So what you're saying is with the concept, it could fit, I guess, I don't know, could you just re-explain that again?
sure. The width of the current football field the area where the track long jump is, if that long jump were relocated somewhere else, you're only short width-wise of a field hockey field and a soccer field by not that much. In fact, there's usually a range. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but let's say we're, 55 to 65 yards. We might be at 55 right now, and we could probably gain 5 yards without having to rip up the entire track, is where I was going with that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because one of the other things that's why we talk about fields, and I keep talking about the amenities side that I think is so important. Looking at Fitch, I don't think I've ever in many years seen both sides of the bleachers to capacity. There's almost more bleachers there than field, and in some of the concepts now of well-designed fields, you actually see a nice size field and one side kind of home and away on the better position side of the field. And then obviously, I think it was Waterford possibly, or one of them, that you can see the defined line where like some sit to the right and some sit to the left kind of thing. And there's a divide there. But I think there is a ton of wasted space at the high school with our current bleacher and field structure. Even like underneath the bleachers, like the new models, you could have bleachers on one side and storage and actually literally a locker room underneath, close all that in, there's so many different things to do, but especially the away side of the field, which I also sometimes think is the better side. Sometimes when the sun is beating on you on the home side, it's never full, and it just seems like such a waste. The field could be expanded so much further, and the facility there could be utilized. So I don't know. I guess there is a lot of different options to look at. So thank you.
I would agree with you as far as the bleacher. I agree. There's a lot of wasted space there, and just to push them back, and you could absolutely gain storage underneath if you had the right kind of bleachers, etc. But it seems like from what I can see, the restrictions on the visitor side, I think there's sewer caps and things over there, and there's a lot less space between the bleachers and Chad would know better than me, but it looked like there was a lot less available space on that side to move than there would be on the home side. But anyway.
Again, that's where I would let Chad and those professionals do their job.
Exactly.
If we say what we want and they make it work. And I don't know, Chad, if you have any thoughts on that, because like I say, we can sit here and try to nitpick whatever you say, but I mean, the fact is, we would pay people to make that work. I think that's a part of what a well-designed athletic complex would be. It would take all those things into account.
I would agree. And Vin, I'd be happy to meet you out there too if you want to look at, I'm fine to pull a tape and look and see exactly how much room we have. When we look at it, and it's both the field size and then the safety zone outside of that. And most times when we're rebuilding the new field with a full soccer field, because the tracks basically come in two different proportions depending on how long the oval is. And so as soon as we start talking soccer, it means a wider track to make it all work. So most of the time we renovate everything. There's a few places that don't. If you really have a really hard limit that you can't go to, like Coast Guard, for example, Coast Guard's track and their soccer field, they've got like a safety zone of like 3 feet. You're supposed to have 20. So there are some areas that we can, lose some space if we need to. Just not ideal. And when we're talking about spending, $3, $4, $5 million on a new complex, we try to get as close to that ideal as we can. But I'd be happy to meet out there, lay out how long each field kind of typically is, look at what those safety zones are, and assess if it's worth, also what the condition of the track is in and all that sort of stuff to say, is it worth doing a full-on rebuild, or is it decent enough that we can make it work? So we can do that next week also, as we talk about adding the rest of the stuff into the list.
But it just seemed to me that going to with the addition of the middle school field and some usage of it by the high school, in the fall, you picture, games going on probably every afternoon, on the two synthetic fields and the grass field being utilized by a third team or right after school, right?
Yeah. We can't forget the band.
Right. Oh yeah. Right. And then they're part of it. Absolutely. But then the question becomes, so now you have two synthetic fields, a practice field, and then arguably the use after 6 o'clock of the middle school field. And that would take care of the needs of the high school in the busiest season, which is in the fall down there.
Yes, absolutely.
I think one of the things I would say about that is, the whole timing thing. And I guess if you're looking at what purposes go where and how do you make all that work, people don't mind coming back for a game perhaps. But, if you're talking about practices, sharing the middle school field for high school practice, I guess the question is, can the high school team get out there at, whatever time and get on that field and off before the middle school gets out of school and they want to use it? Or do they have to wait until after the middle school? In which case you're talking about people maybe leaving the high school and coming back. So that's the kind of, that's the price or the trade-off that you need to kind of consider as you're talking about, using the middle school as an overflow space. For games, I think it works. For practices,
Yeah, I agree.
well,
I would agree with you totally.
Yeah, I'll be honest, it's already an issue because there's that field at the middle school is also a PE facility. So even the teams that have been using it can't use it until a certain time when Groton Middle School is in session. Because obviously they have their middle school PE up until about 3 o'clock, and then they have after school intramural activities.
Sure.
So the fact that we've been able to use it at all has always been after middle school is done with their activities, sometimes not till 4:30, 5 o'clock. And again, at this time of the year, that leaves us with about an hour of daylight. So there's no way without lights, we can really accommodate.
Portia has her hand up again, Frank.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that, looking once again, that same factor, high school gets out much earlier. They also get out early on Tuesday. A bunch of kids were running, a bunch of high school kids on a middle school property, before they're let out. It's quite distracting on many levels. I mean, it's not ideal and probably won't happen to its full capacity, and we really just don't want to cut out the availability. The high school's all excited to have this use of this brand new field, but we don't want to box out the middle school events either that now went from 2 middle schools down to 1. And their needs are going to be pretty high because that's the only fields they have on campus. And they currently don't bust them off for anything. So
they're currently not playing middle school sports either. So so if they were middle school soccer, for example, this fall, they would be on that field every afternoon.
Correct. Right.
With either a game or a practice. So.
Right. So the usage now, look, I just don't want it to be blurred with COVID.
Yeah.
What that's going to look like at full capacity, all the sports up and running. I don't know. It's going to be, and I also picture, the middle school coming down. The really important thing is to really make sure that the track and field is also met because that is our only track, as it was stated here tonight. And the throwing events are very important. And the, some of the stuff that has not been updated already, like the long jump and all that needs some patching, even if this plan doesn't take off for 4 or 5 years, it needs help now. I only see the benefit of the sports teams improving. And with that, the accessibility for the middle schools to get right onto Haley Farm from the high school and start running the high school course for cross country is going to be huge in the big competition ring, right? When we start looking at that. Also from track and field, the kids now being able to, get access to that field, it's almost going to be tough because the high school is going to be down there, but you're going to have middle schools, right behind them using that field too. So we already have that, I see, post-COVID track season is going to be kids everywhere. And that's a great thing. So we really want to make sure that complex is set up as such, and really make sure the accommodations are in those areas for the students throughout that whole area. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that, I would say without any question that the high school's utilization of that field will be after the middle school is done. And that's the only way that's going to work, is to have lights on the field, right? So that's a foregone conclusion that none of this works at that middle school. The high school will never get on it, except on the weekends maybe, if there's no lights on that field.
And if
sure.
we do go with a grass field, we are recommending lights down there, correct? For that flex space where the throwing fields are, we're recommending lights if it's non-turf.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Frank, two things. One is,
Yeah.
I just from hearing the consensus, to me, it still seems like we're on option one. And if it costs a little extra to kind of make a flat area in a place that's not flat, it seems like, what I'm hearing as consensus is that's the way we would want to go. We would want to try to accommodate the high school sports at the high school, and not kind of, try to make something work at the middle school operationally that could have some negative consequences. So, I guess, and somebody disagree with me if I'm not reading the comments and things from people, but I haven't heard anybody say option two is really what I'd like. I'm hearing more people say, we want to keep the stuff at the high school. Is that consensus? Is that not consensus?
Well, I think using the middle school, like what we're seeing happening now at the middle school, is a really good example of what we don't like. It wasn't thought through. Like lights weren't put on the field, obviously, and we know, all of us understand that that's an issue. And so now you have maybe an hour for high school kids to get on there. And so when we present, like, we want to think this through as best we can. And using the middle school situation right now is a really good example for us what not to do.
Very, very true.
And also, I have to pick my son up at marching band practice at 8:30. So.
All right. So yes, I guess I saw Rich's hand. I think he waved a little bit, but then we'll also have to kind of maybe wrap this up and then set another meeting date. So.
Okay, Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, as Portia was saying, the middle school also uses the track and field facility. So that is used in the spring by the middle school for meets. And all I'm with that, what Chad presented, safety is a big issue for those throwing areas. Flatness is a big issue. Being adjacent to the track for both competitions and for practice are all important things that have to be taken into consideration. So if that is constructed to the west on some land there that's adjacent to the track, it'd be on a fill area, that is fine as long as it meets those criterias that I just pointed out. And I don't want to see the track ripped up. I mean, that would cost me a lot of practice time if it was. But from all I know about putting in a field like that, that track, number one, is about 14 years old now as far as the surface goes. It's probably going to need to be resurfaced soon. So when you're talking about what the life of that track is now, not that the base or anything like that, but a resurfacing project is probably going to have to take place pretty soon.
All right.
Thanks,
So,
Rich.
so we can get Larry to his son's practice and pick him up.
Right. So what would you like to do at the next meeting? Would you like to reach out to the baseball, softball community and invite them and kind of tell them where we are there?
I think I would expand that. I would expand that to everybody we've kind of talked to.
Okay.
To field users. I mean, get everybody in the room and do the give and take and do the, yeah. So I think we had a bigger rather than
With
smaller.
option one.
Yeah, I think it'd be important to also invite, we have the athletic director, but if any, like the marching band,
Sure.
wants to come down and speak about their needs, I think it would be important to have track, as well as, field, like bring everybody, like, let's talk, let them see this, and from a coach's perspective, spit out their concerns or no concerns or thoughts. I think it would be important to invite all the field users, but I don't know, that's just my thought, or at least to be able to submit something, but we'll see.
Okay. So,
Chad had his hand up.
oh, sorry, Chad, go ahead.
Nope, I'm all good. I was just saying option 1 was my vote.
Oh, okay.
All
Sorry.
good.
So our next scheduled meeting would be the 19th. So we got 5 weeks in there. I would suggest that to get the word out, to get people involved, I would suggest like November 5th, which is 3 weeks from now. That gives enough time to kind of get the word out to those who would like to come. And then, so our next meeting would be the 5th, followed by, and then our next scheduled meeting would be the 19th.
Just another suggestion is,
Yeah.
I know with some other tasks and committees before it goes like to council or something else, it might be nice if you have all the field people come one day and then offer another day where you open it up to public comment while you're still in the drafting phase, so that, people, when they get it presented to them, it's not, there might be some great ideas from the public of, taxpayers that has some ideas they want to throw to the task. And so it's appropriate, I feel, to open up the task and have a public comment and say that we're in the final phases or close to it. And is there anybody in the community that wants to come and speak openly or submit any comments, so that we, are taking everything into consideration. But just a thought.
Yeah, I think the more we get it out there, the better we are, for sure. So why don't we set the 5th for the invitation to all that have been here, all the folks we've spoken to. And then we could do something like that on the 19th, because we're starting to get to the end here.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Does that kind of follow the flow that we're on? And then after that, we see where we're at.
We could, you said 3 weeks, if 2 weeks or whatever, you could do it as well. And maybe we even get 2 of those, like the field people in 2 weeks, and then you get the public in 3 weeks, and then you still have.
Okay.
I don't know if that's just throwing it out there as an option for folks.
Jerry, though, and Portia, also the budget process we're now in. When does the council try to set budget? I'm just thinking if there needs to be fees in next year's budget, not obviously for construction of anything, but if for designing or whatever, if that needs to get in budget, do we need to have kind of council buy-in on the plan before the manager shows up with budgets and stuff? Yeah, I don't know the timing of the budget.
Typically, the town staff are putting together capital budgets right now and planning fees for kind of designing, conceptual plans for this would be, certainly by December. I've talked to, the director of Parks and Rec and others over in the planning department, so they kind of know to expect it. I think there's a little bit of time, but certainly by the end of the year, and that was, that's what we've been saying since we started here. By the end of this year, we want to have, a plan in place and some kind of a concept for what the planning is going to, potentially cost. So we can put that into the budget and have elected officials, act on it early in 2021.
Well, I have no issues meeting, the 29th, the 5th, and the 12th, the 19th, excuse me. I'm available, so I have no, so we can make the 29th. Well, I'll call that the folks that we've spoken to, the users, and then we could take November 5th and put the word out for public comment or public to to see where we're at and what kind of lay it out there. And then our scheduled meeting would be the 19th.
Okay.
Everybody good with that? Yeah? Okay. So I think that, any other comments? I make sure I can't see all the hands all the time.
No,
Nothing?
sorry, I'm
We all
trying to
good?
keep up with
No, no,
that.
that's fine. I'm just making sure.
I don't see any hands, and I guess the next thing would be a motion to adjourn, if somebody were to care to.
I'll make that motion.
All right, Larry, I know you're trying
All
to.
right, Larry. Second, anyone?
I'll second.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks,
All
guys.
right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks for all the help. Thank
Everybody.
you.
Ciao.
Bye.